we celebrated our 10-year anniversary of the original Souvla BTS in 2025. The original investors just got another dividend check for literally their original investment. Could Souvla be in every major city and become a $1 billion+ company? For sure. Entrepreneurship is living a few years of your life, living like most people won't, so you can spend the rest of your life living like most people can.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining Side Equity. I'm your host, Juliana Rotolo, and I'm thrilled to be joined here today by Charles Bililies, the founder and CEO of Souvla. Thank you so much for being here.
Juliana, thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure. And as I was saying before we got on camera, like a real delight to do this in person.
Likewise, whenever we can, right?
Yeah.
So appreciate the time. I read up on your background. I'm really fascinated by your story, your path to founding Souvla. So I just love to start there.
Sure.
Maybe you could just give the audience an overview of what Souvla is, what the concept was, and how you came up with the idea.
Sure. So Souvla is a group of what we call fast fine restaurants, Greek restaurants, started here in the city of San Francisco. We serve an elevated version of the gyro sandwich, now salad, along with frozen Greek yogurt and the country's only all Greek beverage list down to the sparkling water. Souvla is somewhat a reflection of my relationship with my own cultural heritage, being American born, but to Greek parents on both sides. So we really kind of elevate and sort of modernize and sort of infuse a lot of the Greek cuisine, the sort of street food of Greek cuisine with like the beauty and bounty of California. And so we are about to celebrate 12 years in business next month. Souvla Day, thank you. Souvla Day is April 8th, as it's being sort of known in the city of San Francisco after our 10-year anniversary. We have 6 restaurants, 5 in the city, 1 in Marin, and aspirations to continue to grow in the next few years, certainly in and around the Bay Area.
Awesome. Fantastic. Anything special going on for Souvla Day?
We use Souvla Day now as sort of the first marker for any new initiatives or changes or evolutions. One of the many great things about Souvla is the fact that it, for the most part, doesn't really change. People have come to know the quality and consistency to the point that it's like being thought of now amongst the residents of San Francisco, almost like a utility. You've got your like electricity, your water, and your Souvla. It's like we're open and we're serving 7 days a week all the time. My team and I spend a lot of time in the back half of the year thinking about what we want to do in the year ahead. And it just so happens that Souvla Day sort of more or less, culminates with the end of the first quarter. So we kind of give ourselves Q1 to like work on all kinds of cool stuff. Last year we did our first, what's known in the restaurant business as an LTO, limited time offering. We did a couple of new menu items. Those are going to evolve a little bit more in 2026. We are adding a new side dish to the menu. We're really expanding our feta brined rotisserie chicken offerings. So all kinds of cool little iterations and improvements and evolutions kind of get rolled out in the next few weeks.
Amazing. That's very exciting.
Yeah.
And 12 years in business.
12 years in business, yeah. 12 years in business in a city that is arguably one of the most difficult to operate restaurant.
Yeah, I would love to talk about that. So I know, obviously, I'm not in the restaurant industry myself, sort of a naive bystander.
That's fine.
Big proponent. I'm a huge diner. I
Yes.
also eat out, especially in San Francisco. The cuisine here is amazing. Souvla being one of my favorites.
Thank you.
But I am curious from the management side.
Yes.
What makes it so challenging to operate a business in San Francisco?
Well, I think first and foremost is the expense. If you compare, and this is when you think about when you zoom out and you think about the United States, and then you start to zoom in and you think about the state of California, which obviously, in so many ways is trying to do the right thing with respect to providing all types of benefits and securities and things like that for the people that work in these businesses. All of those are expensive. You zoom in more into the Bay Area and then even more into the city of San Francisco, we're inside of multiple bubbles. And I think we all know, you live here. I lived in San Francisco for 15 plus years. It's a very expensive city to live in, very small in terms of the population size and the physical geography, not a tremendous amount of housing development. So we got supply, demand, all that stuff. We don't have a level of public transit, unfortunately, like other major cities where like take New York, for example, you can afford to live in an outer borough and take the subway in because they run 24 hours a day and they're pretty inexpensive. So, when you think about folks working in restaurants, it makes it a lot more challenging for so many of these service jobs and people that work in them there. You've got expensive rents, again, supply demand. And then you have a tremendous amount of regulation and rules that you need to follow, and all I think come from a good place, but they're just expensive. When we went from 1 to 2 locations in almost 10 years ago, it'll be 10 years ago this year. We got out ahead of the requirement of small to medium sized employers to provide health insurance. So like every Souvla employee today has full medical benefits
Wow.
in addition to 401k, in addition to paid vacation, and all types of other things. They're incredible benefits to offer, and we feel really, really fortunate to be in a position economically to provide that. There's a lot of regulatory compliance where you have to do versions of that. We exceed so many of that. Those are just very expensive for the average small restaurant to do.
Yeah.
All of those things sort of stack up. And when you look at a standard restaurant P&L, I mean, half of it is going to, literally what's on the plate, and who's cooking and serving it to you, and then you start to add in everything else, whether it's rent, whether it's, utilities, linen, all these other things. The restaurant industry is notoriously very, very difficult. And also known for its very, very slim margins. So the notion behind the format, what we call fast fine, we very much sort of pioneered this style of restaurant, this sort of basically building off of the commercial and economic success of fast casual, but elevating, leveling it up, and finding this interesting niche between your sort of more conventional QSR, quick service restaurant, or fast casual, and your full service sort of middle of the road restaurant. So I always sort of say that Souvla and the dining experience at Souvla is 80% of the full service experience at 50% of the price.
Love that. I actually discovered the term fast fine dining when I was
Yes.
researching Souvla. I wasn't familiar with it. I thought there was fast casual and then there was fine dining.
Yes.
So that middle ground is very interesting to me. And I guess, did you intentionally set out to build something in that category, or did you
did.
just see the need? Like, what went into that?
I intended to do that. And it was really difficult in the early days. I'm sure we'll talk a lot about how like the sort of the world before Souvla or the ramp up to when we opened. It was a very difficult thing to explain to people because it didn't really exist.
Yeah.
And what I saw were two things. One, almost my entire career prior to Souvla was in fine dining, like true, like high end, Michelin multi-star restaurants. So I had the skill set, the knowledge, the pedigree, the experience in that world that I wanted to kind of figure out a way to sort of distill down into something that had a broader appeal. And then also, when you think about starting in sort of 2010, 2011, that's when sort of the first kind of like, what do you call it, a warning or whatnot, but the city of San Francisco sort of signaled that they were going to make this move to a $15 an hour minimum wage. And probably at that time, minimum wage was probably 10-ish dollars. So that started to set off a lot of alarms across the local restaurant industry. And so I had some time to sort of think about it. It's like, okay, if this is where the ball's going, how do I sort of leverage my background and my skill set in fine dining with a business model that is sort of similar to the more conventional fast casual, with its sort of more limited service and ability to do more volume, and sort of bring those two things together. And so the Souvla story is told in sort of two parallel paths, and one of them being the format and the other being the product.
Awesome. And I am curious about you seem very detail oriented. A lot of thought went into the specific concept. You said
Yes.
the menu is simple. It's like beautifully simple when you go in. There's only a few choices,
Right.
but everything is so good. So you're going to get something great when you're walking into a store with a very simple menu. I tend to think that's the case. So how did you come up with those specific details? Did you know you wanted a simple menu? Did you know you want to locally source the ingredients? Like, what went into the actual concept?
Sure. The The notion of the simple menu was derived and inspired quite a bit from my own personal love of In-N-Out, which is a California, obviously, burger staple.
Who doesn't love it?
Who doesn't love In-N-Out? And it's been around now for 60 plus years. And, you think that we have a simple menu, look at the In-N-Out menu. I mean, it's literally one thing well. And so that was sort of the inspiration for Souvla in terms of its original sort of menu hierarchy. And then sort of with that came the sort of antithesis to the more conventional QSR or fast casual format where you have the sort of the what they call in the industry the make line, where you're sort of like following along and you're watching your sandwich or your bowl being built, which felt very cafeteria to me. And it also was something where you're letting the guests sort of like choose their own adventure. And oftentimes people don't make good decisions. Like they mix and match things that may not really work. And so now all of a sudden you go and it's like, oh, I didn't have a good meal there. Well, it's like, well, you probably put some stuff that probably shouldn't have got together. So I wanted to, with the format of Souvla and the menu of Souvla, first of all, I wanted to eliminate the notion of the make line. But I wanted to make sure that people felt a connection to what they were eating, which is why when you walk into any of our restaurants, you see the meats spinning on the rotisserie there. So you can kind of look at the chicken or the pork shoulder or whatever it is and say, cool, like I see, like I recognize that, like that is a whole unprocessed piece of meat, like that will go into my sandwich or salad. And then on top of that, curating what we call internally as sets, the sort of combination of ingredients, the vegetables, the cheeses, the yogurt sauces that happen to pair really, really well with that. And what was interesting to your earlier point about going in to a Souvla and seeing such a simple menu, what was really interesting in the very early days when we first opened the original restaurant in Hayes Valley was watching people be so confused because there were so few things in the menu, because so many people were so conditioned to going to these Mediterranean sort of esque restaurants and seeing just this massive menu, because most of them kind of your sort of standard sort of gyro kebab shop generally has like a zillion things on the menus. They were like really sort of confused, like, wait a minute, there's only 4 things. It's like, yeah, you just pick one of these meats and you want it as a sandwich, a wrapped sandwich, or you want it as a salad. It's like, it's that easy. And what was also really interesting to watch is in the early days, people were really almost kind of put off by that. Something switched, and like I started to watch guests, the early dining guests of Souvla, start to bring in their friends, their family, their parents, whatever. And it's like, okay, here's how this works. You pick this thing, you do this thing. And they started to sort of evangelize on behalf of Souvla. And people also started to notice that despite what looks to be a very small, simple, kind of rigid menu, there's actually a tremendous amount of flexibility that lives inside of that. We don't advertise it. I'm a big proponent, like people kind of don't want choice. They want to sort of be told what to have, and or they already have in their head what they want to have. But there's a lot of flexibility around, like, you can eat or don't eat dairy. Like, we can make anything without dairy. Vegans, yes, it is a very meat-centric concept. Like, you can have, like, we have options for vegans. I was at a dinner last night with someone who has celiac, and she's like, Souvla is my go-to because you can go there and not contend with any gluten, to the point that we just fry French fries in the fryer. So it's like, unless you're having a sandwich, it's basically gluten-free. And we've developed like interesting sort of followings within a lot of these dietary sort of tribes, if you will. Like the paleo community loves Souvla because you can get a bunch of lean protein and a bunch of veggies. So there's all of these little like unintended consequences, but all like really positive things that were sort of derived out of such a simple menu.
I love that concept of people want to be told what to eat. I mean, every time I go to a restaurant, I'm like, what's the best thing on the menu?
That's right.
Like, especially if it's your first time, you don't want to make your own decision. So I genuinely believe in that.
It's always interesting. I'm fortunate to travel around quite a bit, and if Souvla comes up, a lot of people tend to know it, and I always love asking people what their Souvla order is, because it is one of those things where, with very, very few exceptions, people kind of they have their version of the dish and done in the way that they want it. Yeah. So, and we have a thing called Greek style, which is sort of an homage in 2 parts to In-N-Out, the animal style, and also the way that souvlaki and gyro is traditionally served in Greece, where they put fries into the sandwich. So that's like one of the secret off-menu hacks, but people like to mix and match proteins and sets. I, for example, tend to order the chicken salad, but I have it on the setup from the pork dish because it has the tomatoes and the feta and everything like that.
Interesting.
You're a Souvla regular.
Yes, I am.
We're talking near like a 10-minute walk to a Souvla. What do you normally get?
My go-to is the lamb salad.
Okay.
As is. I really like it.
Okay.
Side of Greek fries, of course. The
Okay.
fries are
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
I will say I came to San Francisco from New York about a year and a half ago.
Sure.
The first location I went to was in Hayes Valley.
The original?
Yep. And I was blown away at that because at the time, again, I was thinking of this in the frame of this is a fast casual restaurant.
Sure.
And I was like, why does this not exist in New York? I suppose it's a very like pretentious New Yorker opinion. I'm like, if something's good, it usually exists in Manhattan. Like, where is this location?
That's right.
So every time I came here for work, I would have to make a pit stop at Souvla.
We were about to bring Souvla to New York. That was going to be a thing. And I spent several years diligencing the New York market. You can make the argument that either San Francisco or New York are the two probably hardest places to operate restaurants. Right. It's San Francisco more so from the labor sort of like regulatory standpoint. New York more from a real estate and just competition standpoint. Mm-hmm. And so I spent a couple of years diligencing it. My wife, she had opened the Riddler, which is a champagne bar here in San Francisco's Hayes Valley, and had just opened up the Riddler in West Village on West 4th and Bank. And this was in the fall of 2019, and like really just nailed it. And so we were renting an apartment in Chinatown. I was scouting real estate for New York. My wife had moved to San Francisco effectively for me some, 10 years earlier, and was kind of like, okay, I'm ready to go back to New York now. And it's like, and you're coming with me. And so I was like, well, if I'm going to New York, it's like, might as well open up some Souvlas. And we had just gone to spot on 7th Avenue in the West Village, and we're like working on that deal, and then the shutdown happened. And my wife unfortunately closed both of the Riddlers. That deal was not done, so we kind of just pulled back and dealt with everything over here, which we don't need to dedicate more time talking to at this point. But either way, it was going to be a thing. And there's still, to your point, there's still nothing quite like it in New York. It's a huge opportunity for sure. It is one of those things where it was going to take certainly me moving and a couple folks from our team to basically relocate to New York. Mm-hmm. And as time has sort of marched on, we've just all become a little bit more rooted over here. And so the focus has shifted back to growth in and around the Bay Area, of which there's quite a bit of white space still for us to contend with. But I think there will always be an opportunity and hope to maybe at some point in time bring Souvla to New York.
Yeah, you had one fantastic quote. I want to say it was in the New York Times, but it was that you intended to occupy iconic streets and iconic neighborhoods and iconic cities.
That's right.
And I love that. I think there's a lot around that makes sense for building a restaurant, building a chain. Nonetheless, you would ideally spread to big metro areas around the U.S.
And that was the big thing. That was our internal development mantra, and it had been that way, up until fairly recently, and is only just sort of evolved a little bit to still, iconic streets, a little bit less now, sort of as we look to other parts of the Bay Area. There are still really great sort of high streets of some of these surrounding Bay Area towns and cities. So it's just a little bit more of an evolution of that.
Yeah. So. Speaking of which, I mean, location is so important for the restaurant industry.
Yes.
Your first location was in Hayes Valley. So how did you choose that and know that would be the right place to actually start?
That one took a lot of patience. It was several years of me literally pounding the pavement, understanding all the nuances of the various neighborhoods of San Francisco, and wanting to find and needing to find a place that was the appropriate size. You can make the argument that Hayes is too small, but we didn't really know what it was going to become. From our end, it needs to have, there's sort of this Venn diagram that needs to come together where it's a combination of, you want great co-tenancies, whether it's with restaurants or bars or quite frankly retail. The world of retail does an extraordinary job of their real estate. And so we don't have a real estate team, but I can turn around and say, and know like, okay, what are other brands that we like do well next to or nearby, from a retail standpoint? And then you can kind of start to look at like, okay, where else do they have a presence. And it's like, okay, if there's a Blue Bottle or a Warby Parker or a, insert, as a salt and straw, whatever it is, there's a pretty good chance that Souvla is going to do well there. So that was one part of it. The other part of it is a healthy mix of both daytime and evening business. One of the big misnomers is that Souvla is actually perform better in the evenings than they do during the day. People see sandwich salad, counter service, and it's like, oh, this is just like a lunch concept. You go to any of our restaurants, I'm sure you have, in the evening, and the lights come down, candles go on the table, everyone's drinking wine, and it looks and acts and feels like a full service restaurant. So we want to be able to be in neighborhoods that have a vibrant nightlife as well. So that's why you don't see a Souvla in the financial district of San Francisco or anywhere else. And then you want to have a good mix of residential and commercial. So one of the great things about Hayes Valley is it is very much a neighborhood where people, of course, do live, but we are in very close proximity to all of the performing arts centers, all of City Hall and its ancillary sort of departments and buildings. And then certainly at the time, 12 years ago, the rise of the sort of mid-market kind of tech boom, where it was at the time, it was Twitter, the original Twitter, Square, Uber, all of those companies were headquartered about a 10-minute walk from the original Souvla. And became, especially in the early days, like a big part of our like weekday lunch business.
Awesome. Okay. So as you were planning out that initial business, did you ever beta test this concept? Like you had it in your head, presumably wrote a business plan,
Yes.
had diligence the neighborhoods,
Yes.
you found your target location, but did you ever test it on people to figure out if this was something they would go for?
I did, but not as much as maybe others did or have. I did a total of 3 sort of, call them events, private events that were really intended to solicit investment. And so those were the 3 times where I really put the product in front of people. And it was twofold. One, it was one to like, okay, let's just make sure all of this stuff really works. The original menu was slightly different than what it became, but still pretty similar. So let's see what people think, how they like it. And then at the time I was trying to raise capital. So it's like, can we get anyone to invest in this? The irony of the 3 investor sort of style events that I did, not a single person invested in Souvla.
Really? Yeah. I'm shocked by that.
It's one of those things where the concept was still sort of unusual. So people were having a hard time wrapping their head around an elevated fast casual concept. Some were trying to persuade me to kind of make it more standard fast casual. Some were trying to persuade me even more to go like more fast food and like franchise it and like do a Greek McDonald's, whatever it is. But I was not going to compromise on the quality of what we were serving. And then there was a lot of the sort of cart course thing around like, well, where is it going to be? How much is it going to cost to build? All of these other things. The road to the opening of the original Souvla was paved with rejection. But that's kind of a little bit of the nature of any sort of startup. And obviously this, given the name of the podcast we're on, it was a lot of blood, sweat, and tears.
Yeah.
Including like, an original moment. I told this story recently on another podcast that I hadn't really told before, of just like a real meltdown by yours truly, like in the middle of the night, like picking a whole roasted lamb, being like, no one is going to want this at all. Like, what the hell am I doing? I made a terrible mistake.
Oh no.
Yeah. So,
no initial investors came out of those
Yes.
meetings. Did you end up raising capital, or was it just bootstrap? Like, how did you get this idea off the ground?
Yeah, it was a very scrappy raise. We raised, so this is, started the process in earnest, like sort of more publicly, idea in 2010, sort of business plan, multiple kind of iterations of it, gestation, if you want to kind of call it that. And then in earnest at the start of 2012. And it took 2 years to raise $450,000. And when you think about it, so it was a very scrappy rate, and that's soup to nuts, like everything. And we didn't close the last investor check until like a few days after we opened. So not exactly what you're supposed to do in terms of like a little bit of robbing Peter to pay Paul along the way of getting this restaurant built, and a lot of scrappiness in the original restaurant. Of which over the years we've gone back and like sort of we probably remodeled the original restaurant. I think we're in our third remodel now of just like every few years we sort of level up, in every new location that we do, we learn more and we go back and reinvest in all the restaurants. And when you think about the cost to develop a Souvla today, we're shooting for about $1.5 million. So it's literally like a 3x investment now. So, but to your point, it was a lot of it started quite a bit of like friends and family, and then sort of got plugged a little bit more into sort of the local kind of fundraising community here, and was able to kind of complete the raise. But it was, yeah, it was, small. It was, mostly 12.5 to $25,000 checks kind of
Wow.
stacked together a little bit.
Wow. So you really had to grind it out to cobble that together.
Oh, yeah.
Did it ever make you question the idea, the concept?
No.
No. You just thought maybe misinformed. The investors don't understand.
No, I think that it was more about I had never done this before.
Okay.
I had never raised money before. Admittedly, I don't think that I'm a particularly good salesperson. I don't like doing that. It's not what I'm good at. It's not what I enjoy doing. My wife, on the other hand, is an incredible fundraiser. I mean, like if you ever want someone on your show, I mean, she can raise money like it's nobody's business.
Okay, good to know.
And she's done it. She's on her third business now. She did a big Series A couple years ago with her wine brand. She's naturally just very good at it. I am not. So it was a lot of learning on the job a little bit about trying to raise capital, trying to answer questions of skeptical investors, trying to find the fine line between like not giving up too much, but also making enough concessions to land the investment. And so all along it was more about like all of those things I had not done before. I was learning to do, and it was actually it was the cooking and the serving of the food and the operation of the restaurant that in those early days was actually sort of the least important because those are the things that I knew how to do. So like, let me figure out how to design and build and, and raise capital and structure investments and like structure a company and all those things, all things I hadn't done before. So, but like when it came time to like turn the stoves on and like, bus tables, like, I was pretty confident in that. And oftentimes you see the opposite, right? You see people come from the business world that really good at business plans and raising capital, but they don't know how to run a restaurant.
Right.
So
That's very interesting. I bet those early investors wish they had invested now.
in the first decade, as we celebrated our 10th anniversary, the original Souvla beat the S&P 500.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So you returned capital after the first year.
We returned capital after the first year.
Wow.
Yeah, and we actually just in the last few days we do our annual investor memo and distributions and all that stuff. And the original investors just got another dividend check for literally their original investment. I had I think $10,000 to my name at the time, and all of that went into the original restaurant.
Wow.
Just to show investors that I had skin in the game. I was all in on it. From the little, I don't come from money, so like that was, that was there, and just as a gesture of just like I've got skin in this game as well.
Putting all of your savings in is a huge
It's a huge
vote of
thing.
confidence in yourself. I mean, that's hard to do as it is. It's like you add that extra layer of pressure on top of the performance you already hope to achieve.
That's right.
It's not an easy thing to do, and not all founders do that.
And it's one of those things, it's certainly in the early days, it was a combination of like, I think right place, right time, a lot of hard work and a lot of luck in terms of just getting just getting the doors open, and it was a pretty wild feeling. I remember it very, very vividly of like opening day of just like, before we open the doors, of just this, like taking a moment, it's like, people are going to come in and give me money in exchange for this sandwich or this salad. It's like, it's a pretty wild thing, on its face to sort of contend with. So
I'm sure going from like the idea sketchbook, this is what I want it all to look at, to like actually operating on day one is just a wild ride.
it is. It is a wild ride. It is a wild ride. Yeah.
So I do want to touch on your early background,
Sure.
early history coming up to the restaurant industry. I think you have a really fascinating journey into the industry. You obviously went to the Cornell School of Hospitality, one of the nation's elite hospitality schools. You've worked for some of the most legendary names like Thomas Keller at French Laundry, Michael Mina.
Mhm.
I mean, these are Michelin star chefs, infamous, legendary restaurants. I
Sure.
mean, you had all the credentials, right? So it makes that other story a little more interesting, even that people ever doubted that this idea could succeed.
Sure.
But what was that like? So I guess starting super early, why did you enter the restaurant industry? Like, what attracted you to it? How did you know this was the right fit?
I actively resisted it for the first, call it 17, 18 years of my life. I grew up in New England outside Boston, to a relatively small Greek family. But both of my grandfathers were very culinary centric. My father's father owned and operated restaurants in the Boston area for many years, and his name was also Charles. And then in his later years, sort of like pre-retirement, got into culinary education, and taught, interestingly enough, taught in the inner city schools of Boston, in like the sort of like the tech vocational schools. And this is in the 70s, in the late 70s, taught the special needs population how to work in restaurants. And that inspired my father to start his first business. He was a special education teacher. And then so he sort of saw what his father did and sort of like evolved that and got into the recreation and travel business for the special needs population, which he still does today. My mother's father, along with her, came to the US in the 70s, and never cooked professionally, but was one of those sort of savant level cooks. This is a guy who like never had Chinese food, lands in America, like goes down the street to like the Chinese restaurant, gets some food, and like next thing you know is like replicating this at home, like one of those. So in being a big family, everything was pretty food centric. My first spoken words as a human was ordering lunch, hamburger, French fries, lemonade. So you can kind of see that there's a little bit of like the genetics.
It's in your blood.
Yes. But I saw what the restaurant industry did to my grandfather physically. He just later in life had a lot of health challenges, and like, it's not a particularly, it's certainly not a, something you can do cooking professionally, like for your entire life. It's a very physically demanding business. There's definitely a lot of like, potentially unhealthy aspects to, the restaurant world and life. And he was also, of the sort of mentality, very old school, but like wanting to be in the restaurants all the time, wanting to see every dish go out, like, needed to have the control and the oversight at all times. And so I sort of saw all that and I was like, this is not what I want to sort of like turn out to be. And so I kind of like actively resisted it. I was like really into mountain biking at the time. I was racing mountain bikes. I went to University of Vermont out of college to somehow figure out a career in like outdoor, that's something that keep me outside. And halfway through, we came home in the winter break, and went up to a high school friend's cottage for New Year's, all my high school buddies, and I cooked for everyone because I loved to cook. And the light bulb went off, and it's just like, I was like, this is what I love to do. Why am I not doing it? And so I went home and I was like, Mom, Dad, I want to go to culinary school. And they're just like, okay. And thankfully they were very, very supportive. And I come from, both my parents are entrepreneurs, small business owners. So they have a high risk tolerance, and just incredibly supportive people, throughout my entire life, and obviously still to this day. And so went to culinary school, was working at a restaurant while going to school, got to be part of a restaurant opening, saw how like much fun watching a restaurant come together was. And I was a line cook at the time, and also understood that like I was, my early 20s, was like, this is fun, but it's like, I can't do this for like my entire life. It's like, I need to learn the business side of it. So that's what inspired me to go back to school and go to Cornell and sort of learn the business side of it. So I kind of like fast tracked my way through Cornell. I was there for 2 years, got my bachelor's, and was struggling at that point about what I wanted to do next. I had a culinary background. I've been working in restaurants and kind of a mix of sort of like mid-tier and a little bit of fine dining through a culinary externship. Now I have this kind of business background. And so I was like, well, how do I sort of bring this together? And I had the good fortune, and so I ended up taking the classes to TA a lot of the really fun culinary classes at Cornell. And the professor who became my advisor, very wise gentleman, older Italian named Giuseppe Passati. I was in his office one day and I was just like, Giuseppe, I was like, what do I do? I was like, I don't, and he's like, in his infinite wisdom, he's like, well, who do you want to work for? Like, who inspires you? And I was like, and at the time, the French Laundry cookbook had just come out. And so I was like, well, I mean, I would do anything to like go to the French Laundry and work at the French Laundry. And I swear to God, in that moment, he picked up the phone. He knew, had a relationship with Thomas's then at the time, head of PR. And he's like, I got someone here that I think you need to meet. And again, to my earlier point about Souvla, like a lot of hard work, right place, right time, a lot of luck. It just so happened that Thomas was looking for, he needed someone in addition to his EA to kind of help with all of the like cooking components of the French Laundry. So he needed someone that like knew food, knew restaurants, knew kitchens, but also knew how to use a computer. Most people that are really, really good cooks like weren't didn't know how to use Excel.
Right.
You know, and again, just for reference for the viewer, this is 20 years ago. And so I drove down from Ithaca to New York City and sat down in the salon at Per Se with Thomas and Corey Lee, who was at the time was the chef de cuisine of the French Laundry, and Laura Cunningham, who was Thomas's partner, and the sort of a lot of the inspiration on the service side, and like had an interview and got offered the job. And so I picked up and moved from Ithaca, New York to Yountville, California at the ripe age of, I think I was 22. So excellent career move. Town of Yountville, 3,500 people, young, single, like not great socially.
Right.
I
I can imagine.
and not great economically. That job did not pay a lot. But it was one of those things where, and we don't see it, as I sort of lament a little bit these days, like, you know, I would have at that point in my time, in my career, I probably would have paid to go work there, you know? And ironically, I ran what's called the stage program, which is effectively the French word for intern. So I managed all the people that would fly in from all over the world to go work at the French Laundry for free, which I'm pretty sure you can't do anymore.
That's amazing. So what was it actually like working there? I mean, I've obviously am familiar with the restaurant.
Sure.
I haven't had the privilege of eating there yet, but I've heard so many things. I'm like, what is it like working for Thomas Keller?
Yeah.
What's the French Laundry like on the inside?
Sure. Well, I mean, I think the first thing to sort of remember is at the end of the day, it's still a restaurant. In so many ways, people build this up in their heads to be something that is so far beyond, you know, the expectations of a conventional restaurant, that it, I think, sometimes can go a little bit more to the extreme. And we have to kind of remember at the end of the day, it is a restaurant. It is an extraordinary experience. It's something that I think that if you have the ability, at least once in your life, to do, I think it's very, very cool and very interesting and very different to see. So I was Thomas's very first culinary assistant, so which was a job or position that didn't exist prior to my arrival. So I got to create it. And to my understanding, it still exists to this day. And you become the bottleneck or the liaison from him and the kitchen to everything else, either both internally and externally to the company. So it's everything from, you know, dealing with HR or dealing with the finance department or project managing a renovation or a design of something, to travel, to cooking demos, to running the stage program. All of those operational sort of like, you know, roles kind of, you know, flow through you. No 2 days were ever the same, which was really lovely. The only thing that remained consistent in terms of the role is that you typed the menu every day. Now, typing the menu at the French Laundry seems like it should be pretty simple. First of all, it requires a very advanced understanding of Microsoft Word. And I've became like a formatting sort of like real intense person. The menu changes every day. It also goes through generally 2 to 3, sometimes 4 revisions throughout the day.
Wow.
So you're constantly sort of like evolving. Everything else was totally different. And so you had to be sort of a Swiss Army knife of sorts with respect to whatever the inbound request is, whether it was from Thomas or anyone else in the organization. And I think the biggest thing was, and what you kind of had to, in order to be successful in that role, is you had to basically anticipate, especially Thomas's sort of needs or asks or wants. That's a guy who certainly back then, and I would only imagine the 20 years since I've left, is doing a lot of things and sort of expects you to sort of always just basically be in his head. So you got to figure out how to be in his head without being in his head.
Yeah.
And, you know, and figuring out the right way to just like have an answer ready was certainly a big learning curve part of the job. And then I think the bigger thing is, you know, you have to, in addition to understanding and anticipating the questions and kind of what he needs or what he wants to talk about, is like the better way to be successful is you need to be a step or two ahead of him. So you need to be able to see the things that he sees and in general, whenever possible, like correct and or have an answer for why is this thing missing? Like, what is the like where did this thing go? Whatever it is.
Yeah.
Because you sort of be like, I don't know, it doesn't really get you very far, you know?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, it was a very, very demanding role, very demanding organization, as any organization that operates at that level is, and just incredible training.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say. It sounds like the ideal experience or environment to kind of just soak it all in, commit the time, the physical nature of the job, just do what you have to like come out of that on the other side and have all of the training and know-how and then move on to the next thing within the industry. So it
Yeah,
sounds like an ideal first
for
job
sure.
for you.
The restaurant industry, being a restaurateur, you have to know a lot about a lot of things. It's probably one of the only industries where there's such an incredible array of skill sets that you have to have compared to if I was just in finance, like I need to know obviously a lot about numbers and the financial markets and all those things, but I wouldn't have to know very much about like how to negotiate a lease, like how to like the HR, rules around hiring and firing someone, like the repair on an oven, or like, the electrical load of this thing, or it really runs the gamut in terms of like the skill set you need to have to own, operate, and develop restaurants. And it's like it spans almost every sort of industry, more or less. And you have to be, if you're good at what you do, you have to have an above average understanding of all of those things.
Yeah, that's impressive. A true jack of all trades within the industry.
That's right.
It's something I wouldn't have thought, but it makes a lot of sense. And now you've held roles ranging from being a line cook to managing to running a chain of restaurants.
Yep.
Do you still cook today, or are you more on the admin side? Like, are you ever subbing in Souvla, working behind the scenes, or?
No, so I'm incredibly fortunate to have a partner in the business who is also a super chef.
Mhm.
And so Tony came on board in a consulting role in the pre-opening and opening of the original Souvla, when we didn't really know what this was going to become. I had developed the menu and the recipes, but I also was just one person. And so I knew that I couldn't operate the restaurant, run the floor, deal with all of the admin, all things that I was more recently doing. And then on top of it, like hire and train kitchen staff and like get the recipes dialed more for commercial use and all those things. And so I met Tony in the run up to Souvla at Kokari here in San Francisco. Tony was the chef, chef Dezina Kokari for I think eight or so years, and so we got to know each other. And I was a waiter there in the run up to opening Souvla, and we got to know each other. And he just had not only an incredible way with food, of which I really discovered later on because I mostly saw him in the context of cooking Kokari food, but I think more importantly than his immense culinary talent, he has a way with people um, that, quite frankly, like I didn't, especially with respect to just culinary talent. I could tell in the early days that like this is a guy that knew how to like put a team together and get them to rally around him and build up culinary teams of people that just want to come work for Tony and work with Tony.
Yeah.
And so, the sort of the original promise was like, I need help with this. I don't know, like the pro forma like doesn't support two salaries. It supports one salary, which fortunately is me. I was like, I need help. I'm willing to pay you, as like a consultant to kind of get this going. If this does work out, there is an opportunity for you to come on board. That would be the hope. And sure enough, we opened in April, and I think by the fall of that year, Tony came on board full time as a partner in the business, and has been an absolutely instrumental part of making Sugo what it is today.
Did he take much convincing, or was it kind of he saw the
I mean, I think he
power of the
saw.
idea?
I think he saw the power of the idea. I think he saw like the level of passion and commitment. And I can't speak for him, but there was a little bit of he at the time was married, had just had a second kid, so there was like a little bit of this like this feels like leaving a very stable job to come work for effectively a startup is always a little bit of a risk, or a lot of a risk. But the upside potential, was well in excess of what he would have had if he had stayed. So I think there was just kind of that back and forth. But yeah, so much of the quality and the consistency of your salad is of your lamb salad is very much a testament to Tony and his team. So I'm a big believer in proponent of the notion that greatness is in the agency of others, and Souvla is very much not about me. I'm obviously happy and delighted to talk to you about it, but it is about the nearly 200 other people that work for the company now, and really, there's a core group. There's 7 of us, myself and Tony included, that all we do every day is Souvla. And these are the senior folks that have been with me now for a really long time. Our director of operations, Souvla's about to turn 12. They've been with us for 11 years. The new guy, I think, is about to celebrate his like 8th or 9th anniversary, on the sort of leadership team. So these are incredibly talented and passionate people that have dedicated, so much of their life to operating these restaurants. And quite frankly, they do a better job of it than I do.
That means you hire correctly.
Well, I think the big thing is, and we've been a big proponent of developing talent from within. Almost all of these people started in either line level roles or entry level management roles, and the sort of the secondary and tertiary teams that are underneath them, we followed that same playbook. So now we have kitchen managers and general managers that started years ago as line cooks or as counter servers, because we made the investment in them and really developed their talent. So people that had no prior education or knowledge of restaurants are now leading P&L reviews and making important decisions and responsible for their restaurant, which in and of itself is its own small business.
So it's true meritocracy.
Yes. Very, very, and very, very transparent. We run a very, very transparent organization. Our managers have access to the full P&Ls. They're bonus based off of metrics that they can control. So they are kind of in control of their destiny, and we continue to find great ways to provide future opportunity. In addition to the extraordinary level of benefit, like it's been really cool to watch so many people, go from being prep cooks in other restaurants where they're making minimum wage to being a kitchen manager and making 6 figures and, starting families and doing things like that. So that's quite frankly one of the most rewarding parts of my job.
That's amazing. Also very rare, I think.
Also pretty rare. But we've seen quite a bit more success in developing talent from within than bringing people in from the outside, because the way that we operate is a little different. It's a very strong culture, and it doesn't always necessarily take to people coming in from the outside. We just kind of do things a little bit differently that may not always resonate with people from other restaurants. But to answer your original question, my wife is actually admittedly the better cook between the two of us, and she also just loves doing it.
Okay.
It's for her, it's her therapy. It brings her like really great joy. She does the majority of the cooking. I do a lot of the protein cookery still.
Okay.
So I'll like grill steaks and cook fish and stuff like that. And then I generally do breakfast on the weekends.
I mean, initially, this whole career was inspired by a love for cooking.
Yes.
I sometimes wonder this just because, I mean, especially in a craft industry like cooking and then being in the restaurant business, do you still love, like, it sounds like you still like it, but do you ever feel like once you made it your job, somehow the joy of doing it was, it faded a little bit, maybe is the right way to say it,
Yeah.
it became work instead of just a true passion?
I love restaurants first and foremost. And thankfully, I love going to restaurants. I love to travel. I love to go to, especially like I love going to old school restaurants. I love going to places where like they've been doing this thing for a really long time. So the passion lies more specifically in the world of restaurants. When it comes to cooking, I just kind of get more into like a work mode situation where there's just like there's a prep list, there's like a timeline, there's like check, and I don't sort of draw as much joy from cooking than maybe my wife does.
Okay.
To me, it's more of like, okay, what time are we sitting? Like, what needs to be done? Like, knock it out.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
What about, did you ever think of getting into the fine dining industry based on your background?
Yes and no. And I will say this, probably the hardest part of my job, and it has been for a number of years, I still do an okay job with it, but is having the discipline to remain focused on Souvla.
Mm.
The siren song of full service fine dining restaurants continues to call our names
Okay.
all of the time. There's not a lot of other Greek restaurants in the Bay Area. And we have built a brand and we've built a team. We built a very robust back office where like we could do a bunch of other restaurants if we really wanted to. And the reality is full service is very difficult, more so than Souvla. Us doing something else besides Souvla, almost anything else becomes effectively a distraction. And I've worked incredibly hard over 20 years now to get to a point where I can be in the restaurants when I want to be in the restaurants, but I don't need to be in the restaurants all of the time. And having that freedom is probably one of the most important things for me. And so nowadays, like I really, and I did this years ago, I sort of gave the operations part to our team, of which there are 4 of them that just do the day-to-day operations. And I give them a lot of autonomy to do the right thing and to run the restaurants. I still get really involved every time we open a new restaurant. Both Tony and I kind of like dive in and we're in there for generally 6 to 8 weeks, of leading up to, all of the pre-opening stuff and then sort of post-opening and sort of kind of like think of it almost like launching a ship out of a shipyard sort of thing, and getting it off. And then, once we sort of get the doors open and sort of set the tone and the pace, kind of hand it to the management team to run from there. But those are things that, I just, or I guess I should say we, uniquely really love to do. But the full service thing, now you're back to like working in the restaurants all the time, and so like, we've all gotten a little older. We've got lives outside of work, and it's nice to not have to be working service all the time anymore.
Yeah, absolutely. I was thinking about like when you choose to expand, how you decide whether or not new locations make sense. If you had ever had grand visions of potentially IPOing the company, like in the way that you saw Sweet Green and Chipotle, even Shake Shack, like these chains that ended up becoming these huge public businesses. But I completely understand, like, one, you saw a lot of opportunity to your point with even the area. And 2, it just might not be your end goal.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny between the 3 brands that you mentioned. I have great relationships with very senior folks in all 3. So it's been really, really fun to spend time with all of them. Between former CEOs of Chipotle and Shake Shack, and one of the founding chef partners of Shake Shack, and then one of the founders of Sweet Green, it's been interesting to kind of like see their paths. And ultimately, it's like everyone kind of takes their own path. Could Souvla be in every major city and be an IPO and become $1 billion+ company? For sure. Am I the person to do that, to get it there? Probably not. First off, it's like we have a brand and a product that has just an extraordinary level of love and passion behind with our guests. And we understand and recognize that this is something really, really special. And growing or scale, especially if done incorrectly or done too quickly, can erode that very, very fast. So we're very, very protective about the brand itself. One could argue maybe at the detriment of its growth. But for the last 8 years, we've been developing restaurants on our own without any sort of outside, without investors, without any sort of outside funding. And so that does slow growth a little bit, but also it makes sure that every restaurant that we do, we open the right way and we are heavily involved in it. And we maintain, to the best of our ability, the quality and consistency. And so when you start to expand into new markets and you bring on outside partners, or you go the sort of the private equity route, there's a lot of expectation around growth that may not always be aligned with certainly my vision or a founder's vision or things like that. There are definitely trade-offs. Yes. There's a Harvard Business School case study of many decades ago, but it's like the notion of like, do you want to be rich or you want to be king? It's like, I mean, I'm rich, but I am king. And I enjoy I enjoy having the freedom of not being beholden to anyone. We don't have a board, nobody has a gun to my head and says, you need to open it in this market and do this, 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 this. We say no to 99% of the opportunities that come our way. We do the things that we want to do when we want to do them, and we do them how we want to do them. And am I leaving a lot of money on the table? Probably, right? But are we building Souvla for the long term to something that can be and is proven to be a very durable business, a very durable brand, and been able to maintain, the quality and consistency? Now we serve a little over 1 million meals a year inside of San Francisco. So to be able to do it at that scale, which is both big and small, I think is more important to me and to my team than reading some headline in Bloomberg that Souvla raises X, Y, Z,
Yeah.
round, or goes public, or any of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do agree. I think more often than not, unfortunately, you see, specifically in the food space, that degradation of quality
Mhm.
when, yes, the founders start to lose control. It starts to be more of like a cost savings, growth at all costs type of model, as opposed to what the original idea was, which is providing this high quality food to people within your general area,
That's right.
like local neighborhood shops.
It's funny because I still enjoy taking the meetings with the private equity firms because mostly because I don't have the experience in that space.
Yeah.
So to me, that's more of like, I continue to sort of educate myself, and we've kind of gone down the road with a few over the years that have just been more interesting. And I'm always kind of curious to see what someone else thinks that Souvla is, the valuation of the business is.
I know we're coming a little close on time, so as we wrap up, I mean, one aspect of this that I want to hit on is just when you took the risk to initially start this, you kind of left a more comfortable,
Sure.
stable job,
Yes.
went out on your own. You had high confidence in yourself and in the idea, but of course, there's some uncertainty around whether or not the timing will be right, the market will support this always. One, what was your thought process around? Like, did you just know you had to start something and that kind of drove you to push the doubts aside and just continue on the path forward? And two, was there a moment early days when you thought maybe you'd fail?
Yeah. So on the first question, I think a couple things. Number one, from early on, when I was like cooking for fun in high school and college, it was always this notion, and friends and family was like, you show up at a restaurant. Um, and my answer was always like, maybe someday, but I knew for myself that I needed to go out and I needed to learn from the best. And also I needed to learn as many aspects of the business as I possibly could before I even would go out on my own. And also on top of that, like, needed the idea. So it started first with like, okay, so if you break down restaurants, there's the back of house, there's the cooking component, there's the front of house, there's the dining sort of service component, and then there's the sort of back office, the finance, HR development component. And if you look at my, you know, my career leading up to the opening of Souvla, which is basically more or less 10 years from culinary school to the opening, I spent a little bit of time doing all of those things because I needed to have enough of an understanding and enough exposure to all of those sort of departments, if you want to call them, before I could even, conceive going on my own. And then, of course, there was the idea. And so the idea hadn't come to me until, the summer of 2010. And that's where like the backyard lamb roast sort of leftover sandwich story that's been told many times before happened. So it was like you needed sort of the quote unquote experience and exposure, and then you needed the idea. And I didn't have the idea until kind of later on. And then I think with respect to the back half, it's a couple things, because the irony was not lost on me, and which I pointed out to him. But when I first told my parents the idea and wanted to go on my own, funny enough, it was my dad that was like, "Why would you leave?" To your point, a stable job. I was a manager, a Michael Meter restaurant, and I was like, I had to point out, I was like, hang on, it was like, you did this exact same thing
Right.
30 years ago.
Right.
You left a stable teaching position to go start a business. So just like, it's like, this is history repeating itself, and you've done all right with what you have done. So it's like, so there was that sort of side of it of just like, there was clearly something sort of like hereditary and or genetic in my want and need to do this. But then the other sort of thing, and this is one of the many, there are many, many wonderful things about the restaurant business, One of them being like, we are incredibly inclusive. Like we will like anyone can come from anywhere, any background and any skill set and like come and work in a restaurant.
Mhm.
Um, and it's been a home for so many people that couldn't find a home in any other profession, which is really, really great. It is also one of those things where once you have some experience, you can kind of like getting another job is not terribly difficult if you have the experience in the background. Restaurants are always hiring, always looking for people, regardless of the level. And so for my end, at that time, I was like, part of the justification was like, well, I was like, what's the worst thing that can happen? The worst thing that could happen is that I lose money from friends and family, like, and it doesn't work and I lose their money and that really sucks. But also then I was like, not married, like I'm single, I have no kids, like I can go literally get a restaurant manager job at a dozen plus restaurants in San Francisco and like continue to pay my rent. And, the ramifications with respect to failure weren't terrible.
Yeah.
No one was going to go hungry. Like no kid was going to go without shoes to school or whatever it was. And I mentioned briefly the notion of like the original concept of Souvla was roasting whole lamb and like picking the meat and like using it in the sandwich. And so that first event that I did, it was the only time I'd worked 24 hours in a row and I was picking lamb meat and I did have that meltdown. Just like, and I'm sure it was like the lack of sleep or whatever that kind of contributed. It was like, what the hell am I doing? This is a terrible idea. But the reality was like, I'd already committed to that event and it's like, we're going to go do this and we're going to see. And there was a lot of positive reinforcement that came out of it, despite the lack of investment. So it was really just having the commitment to just like stick it out and just keep plowing ahead. I think the thing that sort of stuck with me is it's a wonderful adage that we can kind of like leave the conversation with a little bit or expand upon if you want to. And I don't know who said it, but entrepreneurship is living a few years of your life, living like most people won't, so you can spend the rest of your life living like most people can't. The early days of Souvla, were incredibly hard. The raising the money, the first couple years of the original restaurant, like incredibly hard, put a tremendous strain on my now marriage, but then relationship with my now wife, family, all this other stuff. In the early years, like leading up, working for these famous chefs, like involved a tremendous amount of time and energy and commitment at the expense of so many other things. And now I have the great fortune of being able to sit here for you for the last hour and a half and have this conversation and then not have to look at my phone or worry about what's happening in the restaurants and, get to do what I want to do when I want to do it. And no one tells me where I need to be or except for maybe this podcast. But that level of freedom is paramount over money or anything else like that. And that's the power of ownership and the power of entrepreneurship. And one of the great rewards after working so long for so hard.
Yeah, I love that adage. I think it's a big reason why I even started this show in the first place. Just like that piece of it, that hard work. A lot of people look at entrepreneurs and see the end result
Mm-hmm.
and they forget or don't look into the details to see the road to that result. Was that originally paved with failure, uncertainty, doubt?
All of the crazy like rises and falls of like it was just operating Sula for the last 12 years too. It's just like it's not easy. People see 6 restaurants and lines out the door or whatever, and just like they just think it's like easy street. It's like, no, it's like we deal with an awful lot of stuff on a daily basis. We've had restaurants catch fire, we've had restaurants broken in, we've had all kinds of stuff. We survived a global pandemic, like we've done an awful lot. Like none of that has been easy. And there's still challenges day to day and with growth and with scale, like a lot of those, continue, like a lot of it doesn't get easier, but what is again, to my point, is just like, freedom is just one of the, and I'm sure when you talk to a lot of entrepreneurs, especially the ones that are like uber successful, the great ones talk about, the notion of freedom and doing what you want to do when you want to do it and how you want to do it and not having to listen to someone say, you need to be here, you need to wear this, you need to do that.
Right. And that's the type of personality type that tends to go down this path in the first place.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
As we wrap, I would love to know advice you would give entrepreneurs in general, either in the restaurant industry or broadly, if they're just starting out.
Yes.
What would you tell them to keep in mind?
Yeah, I think that, well, what's interesting is I will occasionally get emails from folks that are trying to start restaurants and want to take me to coffee and pick my brain and all this other stuff. And I'm a big proponent of paying it forward and love to help. But I have also a finite amount of time. And what I always ask of people prior to that is I just very simple. It's like, send me your business plan. And you'll be shocked at the amount of people that haven't done that yet. And they just have this idea, whatever. And it's just like, go write a business plan. This got published years ago and you can Google it. It's out there. But I contributed to a book, an ebook, technically. It's called How to Open a Restaurant. So I would send them a copy of that. I'm just mentioning it. It's on my book, but I don't make any money from it. But it's a really, really great resource of something to read, about like how a restaurant comes together. And on my journey with Souvla, I had written business plans in college as part of a course or whatever, but I never written a business plan on my own. And that was a really, really informative process for me because that business plan went through several iterations before I even started to put it out there and send it to other people for thoughts and feedback. And when you go through the process, and I guess maybe now, I mean, I did this, whatever, 25 years ago, or 20 years ago, but I'm sure AI just can write a business plan for you right now. But like the process of doing it yourself, like you really start to think about all of the things and you really start to kind of like download your sort of vision onto paper and think about everything from like the design and decor to like what the menu structure, and then of course you get into the financial component, which arguably is the most important, but you've got to kind of put a pro forma together that makes sense, that you feel comfortable putting in front of an investor that can look and say, okay, this looks viable, but also not something that's like you think you're gonna do what, and like it's like it's got to be viable. It's also gonna be realistic. It's obviously a projection. No one can really. It's like if I showed you the original Souvla business plan, it's like my guesses were way off in terms of what it ended up becoming, but it's a very, very critical component. So I think the two things really are write a business plan, like spend the time thinking about it and going through that exercise. It's an incredibly helpful exercise. And then go and like learn, go to work for some of the best people that you can in that field. And like take the time to go on that journey and know and understand those things. And I think, unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know, in the world of, Anthropic and, OpenAI, like a lot of this stuff can be almost done for you, but there's great power in like actually doing the work and understanding all of those things. There's no substitute for the actual experience of doing and learning. And lastly, and I think most importantly, and I think it can and should apply to, quite frankly, any industry or any venture that you're looking to start, is in whatever you're doing right now, like start to kind of reshape your framework and your mindset around like, if this was mine, like what would I be doing? And I always encourage the folks on the Souvla team to treat the restaurant as if it was their own. And if you owned this, if you're a general manager at, at Souvla and you own this restaurant, like look at all the little details. Like you want to have that, you want to exude that sort of pride of ownership. And so you want to like fix the thing that's broken, like pick up the piece of trash that's on the ground. All of these little things are just really, really helpful training for like the one day when you go and do this, yourself, because you're going to be hyper focused on all those things as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the advice of working for the best in an industry applies to every single field. So that's extremely powerful. Last one I asked every guest.
Okay.
What is your most controversial opinion or hottest take? It could be about restaurants and being a restaurateur. It could be about life broadly.
Oh, wow. Spicy one. I am a big proponent of, I wish that the United States, and if this was the United States of Charles, I would institute mandatory hospitality service. I feel that every U.S. citizen coming out of college or high school, or we figure out the age, should spend a year in the service of others, and that can run the gamut. It should be in the service business, and more importantly, I think in the hospitality business. So it could be hotels, it could be restaurants, it could be some form of travel, but everyone should spend a year taking care of other people. I think that we would have, I think culturally, I think that we would be a lot more kind and empathetic to each other, I think we'd be a lot more respectful to the folks in the service business, and I think the United States writ large would be a much better place to live and work.
I have never thought of that, but I couldn't agree more. I guess it's just like the slogan, make it nice.
Make it nice and be nice. Yeah.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much for the time too.
Absolutely my pleasure. Yeah. Thank you so much.